I was originally made aware of a series called Sam and Max from an old LucasArts game from 1993 called Sam and Max Hit the Road. And I think a lot of people have had their first experience with Sam and Max from that game. It was a great point-and-click game, super fun, had cult status, basically. They tried to recreate their success with Telltale's version of the series, like further down the road, a couple years later, but it just wasn't quite the same. But despite the Telltale game, and despite also they made a TV series, which is kind of hit or miss, I still love Sam and Max. And I think the creator, Steve Purcell, is a super creative, amazingly talented artist, and who's got a very interesting sense of humor. If you've ever read Sam and Max, like the comics, it's a little off the beaten path. It's kind of it's different, but it's still very worth reading. And I actually realized after thinking about Sam and Max recently that I actually have a lot more memorabilia for Sam and Max than I thought I did. I've got a lot of signed prints and posters. I have the art books and the original comics, and I even have some wonderful memories of when I actually met Steve Purcell at Comic-Con many years ago. And I also have this amazing statue from Symbiote Studios that came out several years ago that's really huge and probably still the best example of great Sam & Max merch that is available today. Speaking of merch, I have these two figures today that I've been waiting a very long time for, so we're going to be checking them out. Now, Boss Fight Studios, about a little over a year ago, had announced the pre-order for these two figures, the Sam & Max superposable collectible figures. Now, what's funny is on the boxes they indicate they're not for kids, they are adult collectibles, which just means there's a lot of tiny parts, so you don't want kids like sticking their mouths all over your expensive pre-ordered figures. But let's see if the wait was worth it, shall we? I will say off the bat, the quality of the packaging is really great. It's full of very genuine Sam & Max energy and enthusiasm, and it's got a lot of Steve Purcell's own artwork. And if you look here, these are actually some comic shorts from his original works that they've put on the back. They kind of indicate the Sam & Max relative size to one another, that they're fully posable, and that apparently they have several interchangeable heads as well as the usual, different posed hands, which is kind of neat. Now, if you played Sam & Max Hit the Road, you will recognize the popsicle and also probably the little Max bag-like puppet, because I believe that was in one of the scenes. So this is Sam. Now, of course, our hyperkinetic lagomorph pal, Max, is also included here. He has the same number of interchangeable heads and hands. He comes with his, he always has a pistol. He's got a Luger with him. Sometimes Sam has his own one. Actually, it's shown here. He has a much larger pistol, but Max has his Luger and what appears to be a phone and a little rat pal. They love having rats in a lot of the scenes. So at least so far, I would say the packaging does a really good job of selling these figures. But of course, packaging's no good if the rest of the stuff inside is crap. So let's see how good these figures are. Okay. All right. So he certainly looks like he's well crafted, I will say, compared to typical figures of the size. They're about, I don't know, say 6 inches or so. Now they've captured him very accurately. I like how even in a 3D sculpt, it still really has the energy of Steve Purcell's original drawings. And as well as LucasArts' version of the two characters. So you have this one little, what looks to be a little like confused or surprised Sam with a little ooh face. His angry face, which actually you don't see very often on Sam, because Sam is such a normally laid back and easygoing kind of guy, but he can on occasion be angry. And we got here the various hands. Now the sculpt, if you've seen my other unboxings, I've gone through a lot of different companies in terms of figures, and NECA is probably the one I have the most gripes with, considering their paint jobs and their quality control. But the nice thing I will say about Boss Fight Studio is that paint job wise, these are really good. It does not look like the chip off quality that you see on NECA figures generally. So that is a welcome change. A very wet looking popsicle. His very famous large gun, and true to the comic and the game, it has a slight cartoony bend to it to kind of sell how ridiculously long the barrel is. So that works well here too. And of course, the Max paper bag puppet. Looks like there's a little slot in here to fit where his hand is for easy implementation. And even here, it's nice how it simulates the fold of the paper bag. Like, just in general, so far, the sculpting is really nice. Of course, the man of the hour himself, Sam. His hat is separate, which is great. Before we put his hat on, let's go through the ropes here. Let's see how flexible he is. Now, I'm trying really careful to be gentle with this. His tie is actually a separate piece, which is interesting. It's not super flexible, so I wouldn't recommend anyone get really bendy with it, but it does have a certain amount of give, which is nice. His arms do not seem to bend out. I'll just say that right now in case someone was thinking that they're gonna do something crazy. They do seem like they rotate, but yeah, if I pull them out, they're probably gonna actually just pop out of their socket, so I'm not gonna do that. He does have a bend here, which seems to work just fine. So you probably still could get some decent poses out of him, but I don't know how you're going to have him, you know, if you wanted to give him like a T-pose, for example, I don't know if that's gonna work. It looks like there is a joint in here that should support pulling out, but it doesn't seem to want to do that. So I'm not gonna risk it. Just gonna leave that alone. But let's see, he can raise it above his head and bend it. So that's kind of the most that you're gonna get. You've got a rotation in his wrist, which is pretty standard. He does not have any kind of midsection twist. If you look here, he can twist like this, but like this here is like a soft plastic. Let's see if I actually move it. Oh, this is actually kind of nice detail here, look. You can see his dress shirt underneath, which a lot of, I will say a lot of places don't go this far into detail. They would have just, you know, made this one solid piece with like really nothing underneath. So I will give them props for actually making him fully dressed. So that's kind of a, it's not usually done with a lot of figures like this. So that's a nice little bonus here. His collar does feel separate from his head. So let's see here, if I twist the head, it's independent of the collar, which again is also a nice change. You get a certain degree of up and down if you want as well. Usually with a lot of figures or cheaper figures, these would be part of the same, you know, like the collar would be probably connected to the head, so they would all move at once, which would be annoying. Or this would be firmly established with the rest of the body, so this wouldn't move. But that could maybe lead to some fun things where you could have, you know, the collar slightly off to the side and, you know, the tie up like this or something, like if you're doing an action pose. So he could twist his hip to a certain degree. Oh, well, maybe all the way around if you're really feeling that way. Let's see his leg bend. Now he does have sockets here, so he could bend, he should be able to bend pretty high. It's, you know, he's a little pudgy guy, so his leg isn't gonna go super high, but it does go as far as it kind of can. Let's see if he can bend. The knee does not seem to want to bend very much though, unfortunately. Wow. That kneecap is very resistant, so that's okay. After working with it, I'm a little traumatized from my previous experiences bending kneecaps on figures, so that's why I don't want to push too hard. But this does bend eventually. It's a little weird. See this sharp bend because it's stylized initially, like from its regular pose. So it looks a little weird having that left behind. But obviously, if you had him standing straight, this stylized fold would look more normal, like it's part of his design. That's a little weird. So if you're having him running, you're gonna see a little like sharp knee, which, whatever. His foot has some decent ankle rotation, so that's nice. But his feet, his toes themselves do not bend. I'm looking here, it's just one solid foot. Steve Purcell's little copyright, as well as Boss Fight Studios information. It also does seem to have little holes, so I don't think, doesn't seem to come with a stand, but if you had a stand with these little slots, you probably could stand him up using these holes. But overall, he's been a pleasant surprise. He's solidly constructed. He has a pretty decent weight to him. He's not like scrawny feeling, like it feels like it's like flimsy plastic, so that's a nice surprise. And the paint job is good. It feels like the paint is really part of the plastic. It wasn't like just painted on top. In general, painting quality even on the face is very solid. Like you see his little pink tongue underneath. There's not so much in the way of like, you know, sometimes there's messy paint jobs where you see it kind of going on top of the other parts of the body. I'm not really seeing that here, so that's nice. Well, this hat fits pretty well. It's loose, obviously, so if you tip him backwards, it may fall off a little bit, but it fits well enough on his head without it feeling like it's, you know, gonna get stuck there. So actually, it's a pretty good fit. Let's try swapping out his head with one of the other heads and see how well that does, since that's supposed to be supported. Okay, it's a bit of a pull there. Let's try his angry face. All right, I'm gonna say this right now. For me, pushing real hard on this socket here to get the head in, it is not having a good time fitting in. And I don't know if this hole here is maybe just a touch tight or something. Normally these things should pop in without me worrying that I'm gonna be bending something. Let's try the other head. See, look at this, this is unusual. If they're supposed to go on the same head, and yet look, this one has way more of this kind of beveled approach, and this one is just a hole, which is strange. I mean, it might explain why this one's not fitting in well, but let me try the surprise face instead. Yeah, that is not really going in there. I guess if I spent like some considerable time to pop this head in, like I'm not trying to like exaggerate things here, but I am constantly worried that if I push too far, it's gonna damage this ball joint. Yeah, that is a bummer. These heads do not cleanly pop into the joint. So I'm not gonna mess with that anymore. I'm gonna put his regular head back on. Yeah, I'm gonna put that head back on right now because I don't wanna roll the dice with this figure since it took so long to get him. Let's try one hand just to make sure that, actually, you know what? Let's try this little guy. Let's see how he fits. Fortunately, that fit much better. Look at this, that's great. That looks great. Sam making fun of his little rabbity pal. Now it'd be funny if this actually moved like the actual bag puppet, but it still looks really great, and that would be great for a figure pose with Max. So now that we've kind of checked out Sam, let's check out Max. All right, here is Max. Hopefully we'll have better luck with his faces than we had with Sam's, but let's find out. Okay, he certainly comes with a lot of stuff. He seems like he has a few more props than Sam does, because he also includes a hammer, but let's check him out. First of all, let's see his little rat friend. It's well painted. What does he got his little hands up? Like he's like, excuse me, I have something to say. He is not posable. This is just a hard plastic, so just a little extra prop, maybe for them to aim their guns at, because they certainly like aiming their guns at rats in the comics. Got a telephone here, which actually has a bendable cord, which is interesting. So you could have him on the phone and then have, if you had any like dollhouse-sized props, have this on a table or something. They get in their next big case. His gun, which is much smaller than Sam's huge-ass pistol. But even his has that slight bend to the barrel, see? Just so you know it's cartoonish and not a serious business Luger. This is just because, you know, Max has his violent tendencies, and how better to illustrate that than with a cartoonish hammer. Now these heads are interesting in that they don't include the whole, you know, the ears and everything. It seems like it's just his face. Not going to mess too much with the hands because I think they're pretty standard, honestly. But what's interesting here about these heads is they have holes, you know, obviously for the neck, but they also include holes for the ears. So, and these are actually pretty weighty. So that's just sort of a surprise. This is his just blank face. There's not even a mouth on this one. So it's just like when he's sort of surprised by something. And then his devilish grin with the holes for the ears. So let's check out Max. Now what's interesting is that he feels pretty solid for such a small figure. So I'm kind of pleased about that. Usually this would just feel like some kind of super light throwaway, you know, figure, but he still has his own kind of heft, which I think goes a long way to feeling more like a higher quality figure than something you could get, say, at like a, I don't know, like a Walgreens or Walmart or something. He has the same, he's got a little more flexibility actually than Sam does. Let me zoom in a bit here. He can rotate his arm out, where Sam, maybe because of his suit or whatever, can't really. So you'll probably get more wiggle room with him. He still has the same joint to twist his elbow. And, oh, not so much of a rotation of the wrist, which is interesting. So you'll probably use this elbow joint here to try to get the hand into the spot that you want. Because the wrist itself does not twist, so you're going to be doing any twisting via either the elbow or the shoulder. It's kind of unusual. But I mean, you could still get away with what you need to. Now obviously, since this is one piece, he will not have the torso twist the way, or the hip twist the way that Sam does. So you will be restricted that way. There's literally no way to twist his body. His head has all kinds of rotation, which is great. He also can kind of look up and down. So it's not as restricted as you might think. It's not like he looks down a lot though, so just keep that in mind. Let's see if he goes up. Up is also kind of negligible. It's not too much. He has the same weird thing with his knee. So to try to get that stylized look that's in the comics, they give them these little bulges in their kneecaps. But the problem is, when they have their knee out, it's this weird sharp look to it, which is like, you know, kind of a little odd. So his feet here say Steve Purcell and Boss Fight Studios. He's got his little different color for his paws. But again, similar to Sam, he can't bend his toes, which is too bad because I actually would have really liked that for Max. So you could get some really kind of exaggerated run where he's flopping his foot out, but unfortunately it is one solid piece. Now that may have been done for stability, because I'm thinking if it was too bendy, maybe it would cause him to kind of fall over or pitch over. But that's still kind of disappointing. I will say, if you look inside his mouth here, you still get great depth and kind of paint quality with the overall face. So that's at least a good thing. See his ears here. Okay, so the ears come off, you know, pretty easily. So when you're swapping out the heads, that shouldn't be too bad. What would have maybe been a little bit better is if you guys have ever seen Nendroids. Nendroids for face swaps usually have almost like a slice here where you could actually lift the face off, but the head itself would remain intact. I almost would have preferred that kind of scenario for Max, because it feels like you could have gotten You could have gotten expressions on and off a little easier than taking the whole head off and doing it that way. So let's try one of his faces. Pull this off, hopefully without too much trouble. Please don't be like Sam was. Oh, wow. I think that is a major problem with these figures is that every time I have to pull the heads off, I feel like I'm gonna break something, and I don't want to break this. I am really pulling. I'm gonna say it right now. There are a lot of these more premium figures, because these go with a almost $40 price point per figure. And although they include all these things, I have found that sometimes it's almost like they just include them so they can say like, here's your options, but they don't really do the legwork to make sure that it's an easy swap of these pieces. Like, I reviewed other Tron figures, right? And all the Tron figures have the same issue where they include tons of accessories and they like to brag that they have tons of accessories. But if you ever actually try to apply those accessories, you find that it's much harder to get them on and fitting well than it should be. And in this particular case, I am very scared of pulling off this head because I am really yanking on that ball joint, and I know you can only do that a certain number of times before you risk snapping that joint in two, and that's the last thing I want to do. So unfortunately for right now, I'm gonna kind of leave these as is. Maybe if you also got these figures and you had better luck than I did, let me know in the comments, because maybe I just got some weird figures. Like, these were just immediately sent out, so it's probably amongst the first batch. But that might mean that maybe within that first batch, there's issues. I don't know. If this is working as intended, then they need to work a little bit on facilitating the removal of head joints, because that's a pretty big problem. Like, why even bother giving me all these alternate faces if I'm too afraid to swap them out? Then they're just gonna sit in the box and collect dust. So I don't wanna be a downer about it, but that is a pretty negative aspect for me. Despite that, these figures are of good quality. And you know, overall, they're obviously very character accurate. It's not like some weird, like it looks like you know, some knockoff version of the characters. Like there was a lot of love and care put into these figures. I just wish that they made using the accessories easier. Let's see if we can put this gun in his hand at least. Now, one other thing I'll say is off screen I put Sam's pistol in his hand, and holy crap. I get that you want to have, you know, sturdy construction, and I appreciate that these hands are super solid, but there's almost no bend whatsoever in these fingers. So when I was putting this gun in his hand, it took me literally 5 to 10 minutes just to smash it in there, because both of these are hard plastic. It is very hard to get this in there and not constantly worry that you were either you know, chipping paint, pushing it through the fingers, or potentially almost getting ready to break a finger. So now, for example, because this gun hand has the gun in it, I'm probably not going to take this gun out again, because I don't want to deal with potentially breaking off something in the process. Really hard plastic, as well as difficult to put on heads, are two cons that, you know, if that's something important to you for posing, you should probably take into consideration. But let's see if we can get this on Max at least. Fortunately, his gun is a lot smaller, so this fit is far easier. Oh my God, so much easier. So yes, thank your lucky stars that this small Luger fits very easily into Max's hand, but Sam's pistol, not so much. So overall, I mean, one nice thing here, as you can see, because of their very solid footing and their weight, they stand very easily, which sometimes is not the case for a lot of figures, without too much fiddling, so that's nice. And as you notice here, through a little bit more messing with his joint, Sam can rotate his joint outwards, but it's pretty slight. So it's not quite as good as Max's, but you can still get some angling out if you want. Again, it's a case of I really like the attention to detail and the care that they obviously took into account with these figures. I'm just really disappointed that the heads are a fucking nightmare to try to take on and off. So I hope anyone doesn't fall in love with any of the other expressions, because I think it's actually advisable to stick with the ones that are the defaults and not to mess with that. Again, these figures were roughly about $40 a piece. They sold out of pre-order, so I'm not sure if they're going to be available otherwise. Hopefully they'll have more that are just for regular sale and not like this one batch of pre-orders, because that would suck for anybody that missed out on their chance to get these. I will say I'm so conflicted because, similar to the Tron scenario, there just really aren't a lot of chances to buy merchandise for Sam & Max. So it's like, if you remotely like the characters, you're probably going to feel like you'll want to buy these regardless. But just keep in mind the limitations. And if you bought them as well, please, I'd love to know in the comments about what your experiences were with these figures. Maybe you got lucky and your movability is far easier, or removing the accessories is a lot easier. But if it's worse or it's about the same, I'd love to know. So again, these are the Boss Fight Studios Sam & Max figures. They'll run you about 40 bucks a piece roughly. And yeah, not a bad way to say I love Sam & Max. Until next time, thanks for watching.